For New Year's Eve, I made this full-length dress out of stretchy green velvet fabric. This was my first time working with velvet, and I definitely had to play around with my sewing machine settings to make it work. As with any sewing project, remember to pre-shrink your fabric so it doesn't shrink after you've sewn it. I'm not sure if velvet typically shrinks, but I washed my fabric in hot water and let it air dry just to be on the safe side. The first step to making this dress is cutting out the pattern pieces. I used my pinking shears to avoid any frays. I didn't have a dress pattern in the style I was looking for, so I made my own pattern with clothes I already owned, and tested it out with some muslin fabric before cutting it out. Normally you should cut your fabric with the grain line parallel to the selvage edge. As you can see, I cut my pattern pieces perpendicular or at a 90 degree to the selvage. This is because the fabric is textured and I wanted the textured edges to run vertical on my body and not horizontal. After cutting everything out, I added darts to the bodice piece to shape the front. The internet said not to put darts into velvet fabric, but I didn't listen and did it anyway. So here's how it looked after I put the darts in. So next I sewed the side seams of the bodice pieces together. I used a stretch or zigzag stitch since the fabric is stretchy. I left some excess fabric on the sides in case my measurements were wrong for some reason, and then I repeated all of these steps on the lining fabric. So the reason I decided to add a bodice lining is because I wanted the darts to be more defined, but also because I wanted there to be more structure and more security in the chest portion of this dress, since the fabric is somewhat heavy. I didn't want it to drag down the bodice. So next I decided to focus on the skirt portion of this dress. I sewed the side seams of the skirt before attaching it to the bodice piece. And you'll see that I only attached it to the velvet bodice piece, and I removed the excess fabric that I had on the sides because I actually didn't need it. My measurements were correct. Sorry, this part is a bit out of frame, but the next step is to add the lining onto the dress. I added the lining in a way that hid all of the waistband seams in between the lining fabric and the green fabric. I tried to make straps, and let me tell you, it was a nightmare. I found out the way to make straps is to actually start with a big piece of fabric and only roll up the edges and sew the edge and then trim the excess fabric off. I did not get this on video because it took several tries, and I just stopped recording after the first 3. After trying on my dress, I decided I wanted to add some padding in. This wasn't originally a part of the plan, but before I could add it in, I had to sew the top seam of the bodice. First, I put my straps in and made them cross in the back. Then I closed the back seam and front seam and left an opening in the armpit. And I used this armpit hole to manually hand stitch the padding so that it wouldn't show up on the external fabric. Then once you're done with the bodice portion, close the armpit seam with the top stitch. Some of you may have noticed that in the beginning I actually had some excess fabric at the bottom of my skirt pattern pieces. This is because I was worried it might be too short. Again, I was worried that my pattern might be wrong. Turns out it was also accurate, so I removed all 6 inches of excess fabric from the bottom and closed the bottom hem, and I used that excess fabric to make the infinity scarf that I paired with this dress. I didn't record me sewing the infinity scarf because it seemed pretty straightforward because all you had to do was close the seam, and then you're done.